Hey everyone, welcome back to the Roto Grinders Morning Grind Podcast. I'm your host, Stevie TPFO. It's Wednesday, May 18th. We got a nice little split slate here, 3 games in the early slate, and then we have a nice little 12-game slate in the afternoon, nighttime. Boston, Kansas City playing a doubleheader here. The early slate looks pretty decent, so we'll glance over that here with 4 games. And I got a special guest today. It's his first time joining us here on the Morning Grind, and it's Dave Potts. Jesus, good. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Man, I'm doing good, man. It's been a little hot streak here for about 10 or 15 days, so I'm doing well. I know you're not doing as well as I am, but the good thing about daily fantasy is even when you're not involved by being able to play, you still get to write about it and talk about it.
Yeah, doing the content is really keeping me more than busy, and it's a different angle, but I still enjoy breaking down the games every day.
Yeah, man, it keeps you in the loop. You hope that your state gets everything locked up and everything's good, and this keeps you in the loop every day. So I'm really happy to have you here on the podcast and talk some baseball. One of the best baseball minds in the industry. So I'm kind of sad though, Dave, that we don't get to talk about Aaron Nola.
Oh, we love Aaron Nola. See, but you were one of the only other people that was on him right from the start with me. Like a lot of people, came on board obviously after you saw him, but yeah, we were on him right at the beginning there.
That kid's curveball is just insane. So yeah. I like Nola a lot, but yeah, we don't get to talk about him, but we do get to talk about the sponsor of the podcast, FantasyDraft.com. If you guys haven't checked out FantasyDraft.com and you guys like the Morning Grind podcast, you need to go over there and give them a look. Use promo code GRINDERS. That way you guys get free incentives here on Roto Grinders for Fantasy Draft for a year. And you get a 100% deposit bonus up to $600. They got a lot of action. They got a $6,000 home run. They got early action. They got all kinds of stuff on Fantasy Draft for this Wednesday slate. So let's get into the games, Dave. It's Miami at Philadelphia. Jeremy Hellickson against Tom Kohler. Any thoughts on these two pitchers?
Yeah, I think that Hellickson is legit. Like this whole Phillies staff has come to life, and Hellickson's been around longer than most of these guys. But if you look at what he's doing this year, it looks very real to me. I think he's a guy you can use in DFS. He's striking guys out. He's not walking guys. He still does sometimes give up some pretty hard contact in that ballpark. He'll always give up some home runs. But I think he's taken a legitimate step up.
I like his price on FanDuel. It's $7,200. He gives you the strikeout upside, like you said. He's coming off of a massive game last time out against Cincinnati. 60 fantasy points, 7 innings, 9 strikeouts, in a win there. He showed us his upside a couple times. He's had over 55 fantasy points in 2 of the last 4 games. So the K upside's there. The blow-up potential is there as well. Like you mentioned, he has the hard contact rate that's a little higher than what we'd like. But at 7,200, he's cheap enough that we can take a shot on in tournaments. I don't think you can play him in cash, right?
No. I mean, I guess if you're playing early only, you could make a case for it. Certainly in an all-day slate, you wouldn't. I wouldn't be totally off of him as a cash option, but certainly tournaments would be your first choice.
Any thoughts on Kohler here? He's a guy that really struggles with left-handed bats, and there's a couple left-handed bats here for Philadelphia, but nothing too crazy.
Yeah, the thing with him is that generally I don't really buy into home road splits. Like it's so sample size based, but Kohler has one of the longest track records of just wildly big home road splits. And it's everything. It's it's walks and strikeouts and hard hits and home run. Everything is worse on the road. So he's a guy I'm just scared of on the road, just in general, regardless of who he's facing, because he just hasn't shown anything for 3 years now.
Is there any of the bats that you want to take here from this game?
Because Hellickson does give up home runs, you can take a one-off, a Stanton or a Yelich or something in a tournament. I certainly wouldn't load up against him at all, but the chance of him giving up a home run is decent. And yeah, I would play some Phillies where they're reasonably priced. Those top of the order guys like Herrera and Cesar Hernandez are always in play on sites where they're reasonably priced.
Yeah, Stanton's only $4K on FanDuel. I think that price tag makes him a really good tournament play. Massive upside for 4K for Stanton here. Herrera is a guy that I feel like could be overlooked because of his $4,000 price tag. He's the same price tag as Stanton, and he's going to go overlooked, but he's always a guy you can target, not really for the home run upside, but for the multi-hit games, the stolen base upside. So I don't mind him. Like you mentioned, Yelich. I don't mind Dietrich where he's cheap on FanDuel 3,300. It's not a terrible price tag, but he's struggling at the plate right now. I want to see Dietrich hit the ball hard again.
I agree. Yeah, it's one of those games. You're not going to go out of your way to target any batters, but you can make a case here and there. But it's not a place you're going to really go after.
If Tommy Joseph hits in the 4 spot again, he's min salary on a lot of sites, especially on DraftKings where you get to play him at catcher, and he's min salary. If he's in the 4 spot, I don't care who the pitcher is. I'm going to probably punt with him.
Yeah, as long as he stays catcher eligible at minimum salary, he's definitely a play.
Minnesota heading to Detroit, Justin Verlander and Ricky Nolasco. Do you believe in Verlander here?
Sort of. Yeah, I think he's going to have some blowups, I think. But, 4 of his last 6 games have been outstanding, really. 8, 9, 10, 8 strikeouts, looking at his game log, and with, a kind of one disaster thrown in the middle there. But I think Minnesota is a pretty good team for him to match up against. Yeah, it looks like he's not all the way back to what he was, but he's basically back to being at least a pretty good pitcher, I think.
Yeah, I feel like it's a good spot for him. When we're looking at the morning slate only, I feel like he's probably the top option. And then when you're looking at Vegas, he's definitely the biggest favorite here in this, 4-game early slate.
Yeah, definitely. As far as if you're playing for the win, he would be the guy you have to look at first, and to have strikeout upside along with it.
Yeah, Cy Hughes against Detroit kind of shut him down. The relievers came in, and the Detroit Tigers just exploded in I think it was the 7th inning of the game on Tuesday night. Ricky Nolasco, nothing to really be afraid of. And the same thing with Nolasco, like what we've seen for Hughes. Nolasco really struggles with right-handed bats, and he's going to see a ton of righties here. What's your thoughts here on the Tigers' bats?
Yeah, I think it's a great spot to play them again because, like you say, you don't have to be scared off of all their right-handers. Nolasco has always given up a lot more hard contact, more home runs than it looks like he should based on his strikeouts and walks. I would have no problem loading up on the Tigers. And that, in the early slate, certainly this is the highest total on the board, and it's mostly on the Detroit side. And I think there's good reason for it.
Is there anybody that you want to take here against Verlander?
No, I really don't see any reason to do it. It's not even that I expect him to get a shutout or anything. The Twins are hard to take 1 or 2 pieces off of. I mean, sometimes with Sano, but I don't really like going after guys that strike out like that. I think I would pretty much just avoid the Twins unless you're trying to be contrarian with a stack, but I don't like it.
Yeah, Sano's the one-off guy that I always say that you can play for the Twins. He has home runs in 4 of the last 6 games. Like, he's the one-off guy if you want to take a shot on Verlander. If you don't believe in Verlander, I'm not against stacking it if that's what your gut's telling you. I'm not going to be doing it like Dave. I just don't like it here. Boston at Kansas City, the first part of the doubleheader. We got Stephen Wright and Ian Kennedy. Stephen Wright, I feel like he's a guy that we need to talk about. He's off to a really good start, and the knuckleball's moving well for him.
It is. He's a really tough case. Anytime you have a knuckleballer, you're going to see some funny numbers. When you look at it, he's got a slightly better than average strikeout rate. Not actually a really good walk rate, a little higher than average. Just normal hard contact. Low BABIP, extremely low homer to fly balls. Sierra is way up at 420, which is almost 2 runs higher than his ERA. And yet, when it's a knuckleball pitcher, there's more of a chance that that's real than with a normal pitcher because if the ball is moving just right, they just can't quite square it up. I'm still going to be on the side of just kind of staying away from him as a pitcher, but I'm not looking to just load up bats against him either.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. It's so tough with knuckleball guys, but I don't mind it for tournaments just because, if it's moving well, he could rack up some strikeouts here against Kansas City. Any thoughts on Ian Kennedy taking on the Red Sox?
Yeah, boy, he's another guy. I mean, just from looking at the game log, it's it's really all over the place. I think in general, he's a guy you don't mind using at home in Kansas City. He's perfect fit for that ballpark, and he has above average strikeout potential. And when he's getting those fly balls, he can give up a couple homers without really hurting himself. But I think the Red Sox are a tough enough matchup that he certainly falls behind Verlander. I have him behind Hellickson as well.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Kennedy. Red Sox has just been too hot. And when we're looking at Kennedy, he gives up a lot of hard contact. So I'm not against the Red Sox stack here in this 4-game early slate. Probably going to be a way that I'm going to go with quite a bit of my tournament teams. Any bats that you want to target here?
Definitely Ortiz looks good in this matchup. It's hard to play for home runs in Kansas City, but the fly balls, the hard contact to lefties and even to righties as well. I think you could play Betts and Pedroia and Xander Bogaerts and all those guys at the top. But Ortiz is certainly my top play off the Red Sox.
Yep, definitely a guy that you want to target here. Love Travis Shaw as well. Continues to stay hot. Had a home run in Tuesday night's game. I just like Travis Shaw. Anybody that you want to target here against Wright? Maybe a guy that you feel like might do something here?
I don't think you would take anyone unless there's just a really good price on a site that you're on. It's hard to play Royals unless you have a reason to stack them with the way they play. I certainly think one of the Morales or Hosmer type bats could certainly have a nice day, but I don't think you really need to chase after it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Hosmer, a guy that really cheap on fantasy drafts still. So if you're going to play him anywhere, I feel like that's the spot that you want to play him. Last game here of this 4-game early slate, we got Texas at Oakland. O.co, good ballpark for pitchers. Rich Hill, Martin Perez, the two lefties taking on each other here. What's your thoughts?
This Martin Perez thing is killing me. Martin, I can't even call him Martin. He's so annoying. Like, he should have what his Sierra says he is, which is a 527. Like, he should not be able to get anyone out with. He walks basically the same number as he strikes out. It's terrible, and yet he always sort of seems to just squeak by. Like, he had a bad game here and there, but he's really done pretty good when you look at it, and it just doesn't seem real. And I still don't think it's real. But how are you going to just load up against the guy that just every time throws these weak little balls up there and they just sort of dribble off the second base? He's hard to play against, but still I'm going to say play against him because the numbers say he's terrible, and I still believe the numbers.
Yeah, Rich Hill with the curveball. Throws his curveball more than he throws his fastball and continues to show a lot of strikeout upside. Any thoughts on him here against Texas?
Yeah, for me, Rich Hill is very much a tournament play pretty much every time out right now. There is plenty of reason to believe this strikeout stuff is real. It's so bizarre that he came out of nowhere and is sort of keeping it up this year. But, I would be fine if you wanted to call him your top tournament option.
Yeah, I like him for tournaments as well. When we were looking here at the early slate, and he's the highest priced pitcher on FanDuel. So I don't know how popular he'll be. I feel like he's a good option. Is there any bats that you want to take here?
Valencia, certainly. And other than that, I'm not going to take any Texas bat. I mean, you can make a case for Beltre the way he plays against lefties, but mostly you have to look at how Oakland sets up the lineup. Like, they're not a predictable lineup. And I'm willing to take any right-handed bats that are near the top of the order, but I think Valencia is the one guy that jumps out.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. I feel like Valencia is definitely the guy that you want here. Ian Desmond's hot right now. If you want to take a shot on him against the lefty, I don't mind that in Beltre, like you said. But for the most part, I'm going to pretty much stay away from that game. I'm going to target the Boston and Detroit hitters and try to mix in some value where I have to on this early slate here. So let's get into this night slate. Like I said, it's a nice little 12-game slate, and it has a lot of options. So we got a lot to talk about. Seattle at Baltimore, Walker against Tillman. The Mariners put up a lot of runs here against Ubaldo Jimenez. What's your thoughts on these two guys?
Yeah, this is a very interesting matchup. The Chris Tillman thing is worth exploring. I mean, he's taken a huge step up this year, And normally I would be skeptical of it, but there is a logical reason behind it. And he's really picked up throwing his slider, and it's really getting people out. So when a guy who was a top prospect all of a sudden after years of struggling sort of takes this next step, if there's a reason behind it, I think you can think it's more real than not. So I'm sort of a believer in Tillman. And the Seattle bats have been hot, so I'm not just going to be going after Tillman as my pitcher all the time, but I don't want to load up on Seattle either.
Yeah, I feel like you make some great points here. Seattle's hot. This is definitely a spot where you could have a kind of a letdown game. So I don't hate it. Tillman's still pretty cheap on FanDuel at 7,900. I don't hate him, but I want nothing to do with Walker in this game. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's sort of a long shot tournament play because he does have the strikeout upside, and he's really pitching great this year if you look at the extremely low walk rate. But yeah, this Baltimore team is so dangerous, and when you get a guy who's pitching in Seattle and he goes someplace like Baltimore, there's some danger involved. I do really like Walker overall as a pitcher, but this isn't the spot you want to target him.
Yeah, the thing that really stands out to me when I'm looking at Walker, and I do agree, the walks are down, and that's always great, but anytime you have a guy that goes from a pitcher's ballpark to a hitter's ballpark and he gives up more fly balls than ground balls, it's probably not going to end well for him. And just when you're looking at this offense, Machado hits right-handed pitching very well. Trumbo hits right-handed pitching very well. And we know that Adam Jones is finally starting to hit the ball. Chris Davis. There's just so many bats that it's tough to recommend Walker here.
Yeah, it's a lot to ask a young pitcher to get through that lineup a couple of times. So definitely push him down your list. But, you can make a case for him, but he's not going to be a top option.
Any bats that you want here?
Well, that's a really difficult spot because, like we say, both these pitchers really are pitching well. Tillman has not been giving up the home runs like we're used to seeing, but that's still in there somewhere. This is a guy who has given up tons of home runs his whole career, and all of a sudden he has a 2.1 home run to fly ball rate. That's not going to last forever. So I don't mind a Nelson Cruz type player in a tournament. I don't know that I would use anyone from this game in cash. The places where Adam Jones is still really underpriced, he's starting to creep back up with a hot streak. And Machado, now that he qualifies at shortstop, is always an option. So I think those are the two guys on Baltimore I'm most interested in. And in tournaments, certainly you can take some more.
Yeah, I'm not against the Baltimore stack in tournaments, the four-man stack, Davis, Machado, Trumbo, and then kind of figuring out who your fourth person is going to be. If Jones is still cheap, like you said, I don't mind Jones. It's just going to be interesting to see what Walker does here, with the ballpark shift. And like you said with Tillman, I feel like Nelson Cruz, maybe Cano, none of these guys in cash, but definitely options here in tournaments. Atlanta at Pittsburgh, Francisco Liriano against Julio Teheran. What's your thoughts on Liriano here? When we're looking at the Braves, man, they're awful against left-handed pitching.
Yeah, if he's ever going to get things together and have a big start. Well, he had a big start against St. Louis a couple weeks ago, but in general, it's been a rocky year. But this is a spot you would think he would be able to get it all together because the Braves are just not dangerous. They had a nice night last night, scoring a few runs. But if you're going to ever play Liriano, this would be where you would do it.
Yeah, when you're looking at the Braves stats, lowest WOBA, they strike out over 25% of the time. They're WRC plus, under 50 against lefties. This is the spot that we would hope that Liriano just goes out and has a dominant game. So I definitely think he's a top 3 pitching option on this slate. He's definitely a guy you want to look at. What's your thoughts on Julio Teheran here?
He's another guy that he's been worse on the road for such a long time. You have to think it's kind of a real thing. But he looks much better this year. He's clearly gotten close to back to where he was in 2014 after he was kind of off last year. So I like him overall as a pitcher, but I'm not going to use him at Pittsburgh as a starter. But I also don't want to attack him too much. He really looks good this year.
Yeah, there's two guys that I want for Pittsburgh here. When we're looking at his stats, you want to target lefties against him, and I love Polanco. He's hitting the ball really well right now. And Matt Joyce should continue to start with Marte out because of his kid being born. So I feel like Polanco and Joyce are the two bats that you want to target the most. And I'm never against, looking at McCutchen in tournaments.
Yeah, I think Polanco can be a cash game play. I like that matchup. And yeah, Joyce, you'd like to see him get a little higher up in the lineup, but where he's cheap, which most places he's pretty cheap, he's certainly worth a play.
Yeah, what's your thoughts on Jaso? Like on Fantasy Draft, Jaso's $6K. You can use him because, it's not really first base specific. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's way different on a site where you have a little flexibility for him not to clog up that first base spot. It's really hard to use him at first. I do it occasionally, but for the most part, unless you can fit him in another way, depending on the site setup, I wouldn't use him as your one first baseman.
Now, we don't want any Braves here against Laureano, right?
No, you really don't. I mean, sure, he can always explode, but they're close to the bottom of the list.
Yeah, it's really hard to pinpoint somebody who's going to explode against the lefty. If it's a righty, we could talk about Freeman and Smith and these guys, but really we don't have a lot to talk about with the lefty. Tampa at Toronto. Tampa, they like the Rogers Center. Back-to-back games with over 10 runs here coming into Wednesday night. They get a matchup with R.A. Dickey, Jake Odorizzi. I'm expecting a lot of runs to be scored in this game.
Yeah, this looks like it should be a 12-10 kind of a game. Dickey is, kind of like he's not been as effective as Wright, but when you look at a knuckleballer, you never know what you're going to get. And 3 starts in a row, he's put up really, really nice numbers, quality starts. But overall, this is a guy that if the ball is not bouncing just right for him, he can really get shelled. So I don't mind staying on Tampa here. Yeah.
I like the Tampa stack. I was on it, against Stroman. It was very low owned. They had some solid BVP against Stroman. So, and when we're looking at the knuckleball, some people believe in it, some people don't. But I love looking at it. I'm a BVP guy. Longoria, Souza, some of these guys have really good numbers here against Dickey.
Yeah, most people say, and I tend to agree that against a knuckleball is the place where BVP has the most value if it does. And so, yeah, I think a Tampa stack is very much in play.
Is there anybody that you want to target here against Odorizzi?
Yeah, I think Toronto is a great tournament play. I mean, everyone just keeps waiting for them to explode, and their ownership levels just kind of keep creeping down, and their prices are kind of creeping down. Odorizzi only has one flaw, and that's the home runs. This is not a good ballpark for him. He's always throwing the ball in the zone. He gives up fly balls, and this team's not going to stay cold forever. They're just not. And right-handed bats have even been better against Odorizzi. So this lineup should match up well against him for home runs.
Yeah, I feel like this is the spot. And it's something that we've been saying pretty much all week. I feel like this is the spot where Toronto Blue Jays are just going to put up a bunch of runs. And I'm doing it again. I'm going right back to the stack. That's why we play daily because, we have to have a short memory. So I like the Blue Jays call there. I think they're a good stack as well. Cleveland at Cincinnati. Finally, this game moving to Cleveland or Cincinnati so we can play some of these guys. Like probably the highest scoring game back-to-back days, and didn't get to have any exposure to them because they started at 6 o'clock. Mike Clevinger against Brandon Finnegan. I feel like this is a spot that we can target bats again.
Yeah, it is. It's always tough. So with Clevinger, this is his first start. Nobody really knows that much about him. Are you real familiar with him, Stevie?
Yeah, I looked at his stats from AAA this season. A little bit over a strikeout per inning, pretty decent ERA. It's tough with a young pitcher. So, yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, we really don't know. Like in AA last year, he had very nice numbers, but not like blow you away type numbers. So I certainly think you can play Reds bats. Just, be aware that we don't really know what we're getting out of this guy. But I would play the Votto and Bruce. Just assume the left-handed bats are where you want to start with. And then on the Cleveland side, yeah, Finnegan, he's like Liriano without the strikeouts. And he was supposed to be a higher strikeout pitcher, but he's got really questionable control, and the strikeouts are not great. I think you can stack up the Indians as a pretty good play.
Yeah, I gave up on him. I had him against Philadelphia in his last start. If a lefty can't pitch well against Philadelphia, there's just no hope for him. It's like one of those things like, I'm done with him. I'm going to stack the bats here. I'm expecting a lot of runs. And one bat that I do want to mention outside of Votto and Bruce, Adam Duvall is just smashing the baseball right now. This guy is hitting everything hard. I love it. And I love the fact that his price tag across the industry has come up because I feel like we'll get him at lower ownership here.
Yeah, that's a funny thing about DFS. Sometimes you want the guys you like to be a little overpriced. And, with a young player like that who's working his way into the big leagues, I think a hot streak is more relevant. Guys need confidence, and he's obviously got confidence right now. So, yeah, I don't mind that play at all.
Any other bats that you want to mention before we move on?
No, I think Cleveland would be pretty much a stack. I don't think you want to – I mean, you can pick and choose, but for me, when you're looking at a guy who just walks a lot of guys and goes off the rails, you pretty much just want to go with a 4 or 5 man stack.
Yeah, if you were going to play a one-off guy, Napoli would probably be the best one-off play, but I agree with you. I like the stack on both sides here, so that's how I would approach it as well. Washington at New York, taking on the Mets. Gio Gonzalez, Bartolo Colon. Man, has there ever been a thing by a pitcher, talked about more than Colon's home run?
That was a moment that will live in infamy. That was fantastic.
We will never forget about that.
Yeah, that was great. Baseball is great.
Gio Gonzalez here against the Mets. Gio's been, not Gio-like, but not terrible as well.
Yeah, he's all over the place. You look at the strikeouts. He's got his usual 7-8 strikeout games, but then he's got these 1 and 2 strikeout games stuck in there. And I mean, what is that? Like, you need strikeouts if you're using Gio Gonzalez. And on the year, he's got just right out of league average strikeout rate. And interestingly, his walk rate is down too. It's like he's sort of a different pitcher this year. It's like he's made an effort to stay in the zone more, which is, he used to get strikeouts because he was a little wild. So if he's taming his wildness, I don't know if it's a net plus or minus. I think in real life it might be good, but for our purposes, with the strikeouts down, I don't like him as much.
Yeah, I'm not in love with him here, but you have to respect the matchup. The Mets really strike out a ton against left-handed pitching, so I feel like Gio's a tournament guy because, like you said, it's been hit or miss with Gio this year, and the strikeouts are down. But when you face a team that's striking out almost 27% of the time against lefties, I feel like we have to consider him for tournaments. Yeah,
he's like you say, he's a hit or miss pitcher, and the Mets are hit or miss offense. So that's a perfect sort of tournament play.
And the Mets are so cold right now. They scored a couple runs. They had a couple home runs against Scherzer, but man, they were cold at Coors. They're just a cold offense right now, so I don't mind Gio. Any thoughts on Colon? He's a guy that's been talked about a lot this year.
It's really weird. Like, he's kind of good all of a sudden. Not even all of a sudden. He was kind of good last year. When you have that kind of control, I mean, he walks nobody. I think he's behind only Kershaw for walk rate. And you can always succeed when you have that kind of control. But he started getting hit harder. I think for the most part, you can't really use him when you've got close to a full slate. But it's harder to play against him than it looks like it should be when you watch him pitch.
Yeah, I don't want to target him too much. Harper, Daniel Murphy, probably the two guys you want to target against Colon.
Yeah, that's really about it. He, like I say, he looks like he shouldn't be that good, but he's really a very solid pitcher.
David Wright was scratched with a back stiffness, soreness thing. That's something to pay attention to because if he's out of the lineup, he's really, Cespedes much better against righties than lefties. Wright's the one guy that hits left-handed pitching in this order.
Yeah, that's a good point. That would be another bump for him. Yeah, I don't know. You're making good points on maybe Gio's a better play than I'd first looked at.
Yeah, I dug into it too. When you're looking at matchups and you see the Mets strikeout rate, you got to dig into it a little bit. But you made great points when it comes to Gio's strikeout rate, and he's pitching more to contact this year. So it'd be an interesting game. Next game we got Chicago Cubs at Milwaukee. Chase Anderson, no hitter into the 8th inning against the Cubs on Tuesday night. Will Jimmy Nelson have the same success here?
That's the craziest thing. Like, the Cubs were my number one offense last night, and it made like Chase Anderson. That's so bizarre. No, Jimmy Nelson will not have the same success. And Nelson's a better pitcher than Chase Anderson. That's the funny thing. But the Cubs have enough good lefties that they're gonna cause some trouble for Nelson. The Cubs are not gonna have that bad of a game again.
Yeah. So when we're looking at the slate here, John Lackey at Milwaukee, is he a guy that you want to target?
There's probably no one in the game that's been more confusing to me this year than John Lackey. Like, where did this come from? The guy is almost as old as I am, clearly on a downswing, and all of a sudden his strikeout rate just goes crazy. He's got 2 11 strikeout games. I'm still not ready to say you can use him in DFS, but I may just be stubborn because the numbers say he's real. Like the swinging strike rate's to over 12%, a 25% strikeout rate. I don't know where this came from, but it might be real. So I wouldn't talk you out of him because the Brewers do strike out a lot, but we have such a long track record of a declining strikeout rate. Like he hasn't been above 21% since 2005. And now all of a sudden he's at 25%. Something's going on.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all those points here. The thing that I love about Lackey the most is in a good spot to pick up a win. He's been pitching deep into games. And where Lackey's really good is against right-handed bats. And when we're looking at Milwaukee's lineup, the power comes from the right-handed side. Chris Carter, Ryan Braun, you can even say Santana. The power's on the right-handed side for the Milwaukee Brewers. So I actually don't mind Lackey here. I'm not expecting a double-digit strikeout game, but I am expecting him to throw me 7 innings, pick up a win, probably give up a couple runs, but, subside that with some strikeouts.
Yeah, it's definitely a good matchup for him. I feel like this is one of those things where I'm totally willing to admit that maybe I'm wrong and maybe Lackey really just is good now. But I'm sort of going to remain on the cautious side. But certainly, the Brewers strike out a ton versus right-handed pitching, and there's no questioning he's been good.
So let's talk bats here. Every day I give out 3 guys that I feel like you should start your fantasy draft cash lineups with, and one of those guys is definitely coming from this game. Under 8K is Jason Hayward. He's 7,800. He's one of my top hitters in the outfield on this slate, so I like him a lot here for cash games.
Yeah, I totally agree. The Cubs lefties, Jimmy Nelson is a big splits pitcher, always has been. I love Rizzo. I love Fowler and Hayward. I think Zobrist is fine. So, yeah, you kind of – what site you're playing on, you look at the prices and see who you can fit in there. But I have no problem loading up several of these lefties.
Yeah, the Cubs stack. Let's go back to the well here. We talked about it on the podcast yesterday. Go back to the well. This is a good stack here for the Cubs. It's a good spot for them. Is there anybody that you want to target here against Lackey?
No, I don't think there is. Like, that's the funny thing. Like, I'm saying I don't really think this is right. I can't really play him, but I don't want to play against him either because maybe he's just good now. And the Brewers are – this is not really the spot you would say, well, let's take a one-off on Carter and look for a 2-home run game. Braun's coming back from an injury. He may or may not be full strength. So, no, I would not be targeting Brewers.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like I said, Lackey, when he's good, it's against righties, and the power from the Brewers are on the right-handed side. So I'm not taking any bats here against Lackey. Houston heading to Chicago to take on the White Sox. Matt Latos, regression monster, is finally kicking in. I've been saying it all year. And Doug Fister. This is going to be another game we're going to want a lot of bats. You don't want these pitchers, right? Goodness,
no. So these are the 2 lowest strikeout rates on the day. Just terrible numbers. Fister's striking out 12.6, Latos 11.2. I mean, that's like Mike Pelfrey type stuff right there, even worse. The Latos, the start for Latos, I think most people realized it was fluky, but it was really fluky. Both these guys have just no strikeout ability. There's going to be a lot of balls hit, and there's a lot of good hitters on both teams.
Yeah, man, Latos was so frustrating because I stack against him every time he takes the hill. And the first couple of games that, he just went out and dominated, I was like, it's going to happen. Here comes the blow-ups. And it started to happen. And we're looking at the last 4 games. He's given up at least 7 hits in all 4 of those games. So great time to jump on Houston here. And let's talk some bats here. Who do you like for the Astros, and who do you like for the White Sox?
I really like the entire Astros team. They're always risky to play. It is a boom or bust team, but if you're looking at teams that might just explode, I think I would put them at the top of the list. Springer, Altuve, Correa, obviously they're expensive most places, but I love all of them. I think you can play anyone in this entire lineup. I wouldn't even mind looking for a couple cheap bats at the bottom of the lineup. I just think one of these days, Latos gave up 5, 4, and 4 runs his last 3 starts, but he's due to give up 8 or 9 runs if things don't go his way.
Yeah, the one bat that's underpriced on Fantasy Draft that's actually going to come in as my second out of 3 plays here is Kobe Rasmus. Under 8K, this is a good spot for Rasmus. Latos, when he struggles, it's bad against lefties. It's not much better against righties, but I really like Rasmus here where he's cheap, and he's really cheap on Fantasy Draft. Under 8K. So let's talk some White Sox here. Todd Frazier, not in the lineup Tuesday because of an illness. It'd be interesting to see if he plays in this game. Jose Abreu looks like he's starting to get it going.
Yeah, he is a guy that, because first base is so loaded and the White Sox are just not a team people think about, he always kind of goes ignored. He's just a good hitter. Fister is not really that easy to load up against because he's one of those guys that just always outperforms what his peripherals say he should do. But I think Abreu, Frazier, if he's playing, Eaton, Melky, Cabrera, I think all these guys are good plays. This game looks like it should have a lot of runs on both sides.
Yeah, Eaton's on fire right now. Love Adam Eaton in this game. Hopefully you can find him where his price tag is down a little bit still. Price on FanDuel's up there at $3,900. Yeah, like we said, there's a lot of bats that you can target here in this game. Wait for the lineups to come out. See if there's any value towards the top. Colorado at St. Louis. Adam Wainwright and Chris Russin. Jaime Garcia, big, massive favorite in the game on Tuesday, and the Rockies just continue to do enough against left-handed pitching. What's your thoughts on Wainwright here?
Adam Wainwright, wow. Like he and John Lackey traded bodies or something. Wainwright's just – I believe he's just done. I really do. I think it's over. I'm not going to say you stack the Rockies, but also you might want to just stack the Rockies just because who's going to stack the Rockies, right? And Wainwright is just not right. I think I wouldn't consider using him under any situation, and I would consider playing against him with anybody.
Yeah. Would you be shocked if Vegas had Wainwright as a 180 favorite here?
I'm going to say yes, I would be. Is that what it is?
That's what it is. I when I was writing down and doing some research before we jumped on here, I was shocked.
That's weird. I mean, Russin's actually not that bad. Russin is the better pitcher in this game.
Yeah, but when we're looking at the Cardinals, they started the season really good against lefties, and they've become middle, right at average.
Yeah, I don't know. You look at their lineup, and most of the good hitters are right-handed, and you would think that would match up well. But yeah, they're not a team that I think is as good as their numbers look like when you look at the runs they've scored and their overall WOBA. I don't think they're really this elite offense. I think they're a good offense.
So let's talk some bats in this game. You mentioned the Colorado stack. I'm right there with you. I feel like Arenado, price tag is up across the industry, but he's actually one of my favorite plays on this slate. I feel like his ownership's going to be down just because his price is up, and this is a good matchup for a guy like Arenado. Story, he has upside as well at a position that's pretty limited when we're talking upside. Now that Machado's at shortstop on FanDuel, there's upside there, but Story's still a guy with upside. So let's talk some Cardinals bats.
Yeah, so Cardinals bats, it depends a lot on prices. I wouldn't reach for any of them, but there's some places where Holiday is really cheap. I think Piscotty would probably be my favorite Cardinals bat, depending on price, but like on FanDuel, Holiday is just too cheap. It's kind of silly where he's at. I don't mind, I guess, Molina, depending again on the price. it's hard to get excited about these bats. So I would really need them to be cheap for me to want to play them.
Yeah, I love, Piscotty. So I definitely agree with you there. Holiday on FanDuel, like you said, really cheap. So I like him as well. Diaz is a guy that I've been playing a ton as well. He always hits eighth. Nobody ever plays him, and he just continues to hit the ball.
Yeah, he's looked really good. That's been a nice surprise. The Cardinals are just such a great organization. Everyone they bring up, that whether you've heard of them or not, they just start hitting right away. That team, pretty much whoever is on their team, you can assume they're going to be good. They really have a good organization. So, yeah, his price has crept up, and you don't like the spot in the batting order. But, yeah, that's a tough position to fill, like you say. I think on the other side, like you said, Story is a fine play, both those shortstops.
Boston at Kansas City, the second game of the doubleheader. David Price against Volquez. Price, man, the velocity was finally there in this last start. And, of all things, Dustin Pedroia was the one that noticed what Price was doing and tipping off pitches, and he looked really good in that last start.
Yeah, I'm really not worried about him. You have to have a pretty long track record to go through the kind of stretch he went through and not be worried about him. But he's a guy that I really have no concern over. He's at a 31% strikeout rate, a low walk rate. He's just had a terribly high batting average on balls in play, which is just not going to continue. I think he's still an ace.
Yeah, when we're looking at the Royals, it's not the same Royals team that we've come to know. I like David Price a lot in this game. I think he has a ton of upside. What's your thoughts on Volquez?
He's just a dull pitcher that people tend to play because he's usually a favorite pitching for the Royals, but he just doesn't do enough of anything for me ever to want him. Like he's a very decent real life pitcher. He gets the ground balls, doesn't walk too many guys, but he's just average and not the kind of guy I would use on very many situations. He's not really on my list for today.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want any pitcher against the Red Sox right now. I mentioned that when we were talking about the early slate. I have a lot of respect for what the Red Sox are doing right now. And it makes me feel good because they're my favorite team and they're my team. So, when I'm seeing them play well, it's nice. So let's talk bats here. I don't want anybody against Price.
No, I don't think there's any reason to play Royals bats.
Any Red Sox that you want to target here? It'd be interesting to see what they do with the lineups in the early slate and the late slate.
Yeah, it's really tough to try to guess the second half of a doubleheader. I think you would not really look at this as a top game to stack. Just it's low total, bad ballpark, second half of a doubleheader, and like I say, Volquez is not an exciting pitcher, but he's not terrible. So I would kind of probably. I don't want to say avoid the game because the Red Sox are an elite offense right now, but I don't see any one guy that just jumps off the page like, "Ooh, I've got to use him."
Yeah, I tend to agree. It all depends on the lineup here for the second game. So, if Bradley or one of these guys gets bumped up to the top of the order, Ortiz might sit the early game and play the late game. It's just one of those things. You got to pay attention to the morning slate, and you got to pay attention to the lineup that comes out for the late slate. So it all depends on the lineup for me. I'm never against taking the Red Sox, especially when they're hot. The Yankees at the Diamondbacks, one of the best ballparks in baseball, especially on this slate when we're looking at, the ballparks that we have, Eovaldi and Shelby Miller. Shelby Miller, I've been stacking against him a lot, and I'm not going to stop here with the Yankees. Probably my favorite stack here on this late slate.
Yeah, absolutely. Miller has just looked terrible, and I think the game will be pretty popular because it started with a high total. It's not going to be sneaky by any means, but yeah, I think Miller is one of the worst pitchers on the slate in this ballpark. The Yankees are a great team to play.
Yeah, and that leads me to my third play here for fantasy draft. That's just cheap under $8K, and that's Carlos Beltran, 7,600. He's hitting the ball really well right now. Love this matchup for him against Shelby Miller. Love all the lefties. Miller's a guy, 34% hard contact rate. Not a big ground ball guy, 37% fly ball rate with it's just everything shaping up here for the Yankee stack to explode.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're, like you say, that you could certainly rank them as the top overall stack or up there. And I think they have a lot of pieces around different sites that are affordable for cash games. I wouldn't mind a lot of these guys as one-offs in cash games to make a lineup fit as well as a tournament stack.
Yeah, thoughts on Evaldi here? When Evaldi struggles, it's usually against lefties.
Yeah, he's I kind of like him. I'm not saying use him tonight, but I mean the way he's pitching this year, he looks very good. He gets the ground balls. The home runs I think are a little bit fluky. He's striking guys out. He's not walking guys. Sierra's down at 347. I'm generally a fan of him. I think it's a tough ballpark and a lot to ask to just go in and dominate. But I'm not nearly as excited about Diamondbacks bats as I am about Yankees.
Yeah, the bats that I want, Herman, if he continues to bat second, that's a catcher that we get in the 2 spot against a guy that struggles with lefties. I don't mind him. And I have a man crush on Jake Lamb, and I'm not afraid to admit it. I love Jake Lamb.
Yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of him too. I wouldn't argue with that play at all.
The Dodgers heading to Anaheim on the back end of this, swing here for the Freeway Series. We got Nick Tropiano against Mike Bolsinger. Bolsinger coming off the DL, making his first start of the season. Wasn't a shoulder injury, so I don't think that I'm too worried about him being crazy here with Bolsinger.
Yeah, like I think he's on like an 80 pitch count. That's what I heard. And that shouldn't really matter. He's not a guy you'd expect to go really deep anyway. He was pretty good last year. The Angels are not an intimidating offense, but certainly you can't make a case for using him on a pitch count in the first game back.
Yeah, you don't want to make the thing. And when we were talking about Bolsinger, he's a guy that has the K upside, and the Angels just don't strike out a lot. So it's not really the best spot. But there are going to be times that we're going to talk about him. He has the K upside. This is just not the matchup. Tropiano against the offense and Dodgers who, man, they're just ice cold right now.
They are. I feel like Tropiano has gotten like really popular kind of out of nowhere. Like he had a couple of nice strikeout games. He's got some strikeout ability, but he gives up a lot of hard contact, a lot of fly balls. He walks a lot of guys. It feels like the industry is higher on him than what they should be. I'm not really a fan, although I do admit the strikeout ability is somewhat real, but he's got a lot of problems too.
Yeah, you're really playing him, on FanDuel because of his price point at 6,400 and wanting strikeouts. You're hoping that the Dodgers stay cold in this matchup on the road. He's at home. He's 6,400. If he gets you 35 fantasy points and your stacks that you play him with do well, or the hitters for whatever case, that's the only time that he's really going to be worth his worth.
Yeah, he's one of those guys when he's cheap, you can say, yeah, he might pay off the salary because the salary's cheap. But I try not to use a guy that's the reason you're using him if I can avoid it.
Calhoun's starting to finally get it going at the plate after a really cold start to the season. Back in that 2 spot, probably my favorite guy outside of Trout here for the Angels.
Yeah, I like him a lot. That is very nice. He's gotten bumped back up. I think Calhoun and Trout is always kind of overlooked and really never should be. I like both those guys.
Anybody else that you want here for the Angels?
I don't think so. It's a pretty dull. It's really not even a pretty dull. It's a very dull offense. You can always kind of make a case for Pujols, but pretty much Calhoun and Trout would be as deep as I would go.
Gonzalez dealing with a back injury, wasn't in the lineup on Tuesday. It's worth monitoring because his price tag is just so cheap. If you had to pick some bats here, it would probably be the lefties. I like Corey Seager. I'm always going to recommend Jock Peterson as a tournament play. He always has massive upside, and they're on the road here. So guys like Seager are better in spots for, games where they get 4 or 5 at-bats. So I like Seager. I like Jock. And, man, Chase Utley's a guy that I think you can look at in cash games at 2,900 on FanDuel.
Yeah, Utley's got to be cheap to want to use him. I agree Seager's a good play. I would love Adrian Gonzalez to be playing because he ranks pretty high on the list. And Justin Turner's the righty on righty matchup. I don't mind either.
Yeah, Turner, I'm expecting him to get it going. he's just too good of a hitter not to, do better than what he's doing. So, yeah, I like that call. It'd be interesting to see if Gonzalez plays. Man, he's cheap. Really, he's cheap everywhere. So it'd be one of those situations you want to pay attention to. Last game on the slate, San Francisco at San Diego. Petco matchup here for Johnny Cueto. Is he your top option?
He really has to be for cash games. The San Diego offense, everyone knows how bad they are against righties. Cueto's just sort of doing his thing. Great control, pretty good strikeouts. His Sierra 331. He's just a good pitcher, and the matchup is everything you would want in a matchup.
Yeah, and the pesky leadoff hitter, John Jay, dealing with shoulder soreness, that just helps Cueto here. And I agree. Definitely the guy you want to look at in cash games. But when we're looking at the other side of things here, Drew Pomeranz, he's pitched really well this season. And is Cueto's win guaranteed here?
I really don't think it is. No, Pomeranz is very much for real. He actually has the highest strikeout rate of every pitcher going today. And I think it's pretty real. Certainly his ERA is, not going to stay this low. But, yeah, you would expect the Giants to win the game, but it's not a sure thing. This is going to be a 3-1 kind of a game. So you can't just assume you're getting those points.
Yeah.
Both pitchers are in play.
Yeah, Pomeranz, the one time he really struggled this season was against the Giants at the Giants. So, I don't hate him. I feel like he's a tournament option. I think Cueto's the cash game option. I don't really want a lot of bats here.
No, I don't think you can really even make a case for taking one bat. I mean, if you really need to make a case for playing Buster Posey to say you played someone, that's fine. But I think you just totally avoid bats in this game.
Yeah, the only guy that I would probably take a shot on in a tournament is Brandon Crawford. I love him in lefty-lefty matchups. He's continued to show that he can hit left-handed pitching, and he's always under 5% owned when he's against a lefty. So shortstop, really limited position when it comes to upside. Crawford, the guy that I would take a shot on here, and that's about it. There's no reason on a 14 or on a 12-game slate to really target these guys.
No, I think it's really easy to just cross that one off.
All right, Dave, that wraps it up here for the 12-game late slate, the 4-game early slate. Let's play some home run derby. You're my guest here. I'll let you go first.
All right, I'm gonna go with Anthony Rizzo.
Rizzo, I like it. We talked about the Cubs. We like the Cubs a lot. I'm going to go actually with one of my plays that I mentioned for fantasy draft, and that's Colby Rasmus. I like him a lot here in this game, and I feel like he's a guy that has a really good shot to hit a home run.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's going to be some home runs. There's lots of places to look for him. I think I'm going to go with Josh Donaldson getting things together.
Definitely like that. I feel like anytime anybody comes on the podcast and does home run derby with me, I feel like Donaldson's always a guy that's mentioned. So I definitely can get behind that. Let's see. I want to go kind of off the board with my next one. I'm gonna go Beltran. I'm gonna take another one of my guys that I mentioned for fantasy draft. I like the lefties for the Yankees here.
Okay. Yeah, the guy I want to use that you actually mentioned, I was thinking no one's going to mention him, so this is come out of nowhere, but you already said his name, but that's going to be Jock Peterson.
Jock Jams. I hope he hits home run just so I can tweet out Jock Jams.
There you go.
That's like an instant, right when it happens, like it's instant. I'm going to go Stanton with my last pick here. He's super cold right now. Nobody's going to be on him. His price tag's cheap on FanDuel. I like him a lot here to hit a home run against Hellickson.
Definitely he's on the list, yeah.
If you had to pick a pitcher at the end of the day to pick up a win, doesn't have to score the most fantasy points, who would it be?
I think I don't want to just take the big favorite. That seems like it's cheating.
So let's roll out Cueto, Price, and Laureano. Let's make it fun.
There you go. Now we're playing a game. All right, let me look at this list here. This is good podcasting where a guy says, I'm looking at paper right now.
No, that's good. That's what we want. I want paper and pencil guys. That's my kind of
yeah.
group.
Oh, I got it for you. It's Nathan Eovaldi.
Eovaldi, that's a ballsy call. I like it. I like it though. I definitely do. I'm gonna go, man. let's see. We ruled out all those guys. I'm going to go against your gut on Lackey. I'm going to say Lackey picks up the win here.
Yeah, even though I don't like him, I mean, he probably does. Yeah, I'm not going to fight you on that one.
Yeah, if you guys wanted a more off-the-board pick, I would say probably Gio Gonzalez. How about that?
Yeah, I could get behind that one.
All right, we gave you guys a lot of goodness here. Dave, I appreciate you joining me, my friend. They can find you on Twitter at Cheese is Good, right?
No. Somebody already
better.
had that. Somebody already had it. It's at Dave Potts 2.
Dave Potts 2. See, that I think that's only like the first or second time I've messed up on Twitter names this year.
That's okay. I don't even know who Dave Potts 1 is, but he's a scam.
They can find you, 4 or 5 days a week in the incentives program here, writing 15,000 words.
Oh boy, yeah, days like yesterday. Wow, it was a lot. It'll probably be a lot today too. I'm not done with that yet. So yeah, I write FanDuel articles most weekdays and expert consensus rankings, other things.
Yeah, if you guys enjoyed the podcast, listening to Dave's point of view, make sure you guys head on over to Roto Grinders and check out the incentives program. Dave does a wonderful job just so many times a week that, if he's not writing, you can look at ECRs, and he's there as well. Also, head on over to fantasydraft.com. They've been nice enough to sponsor the podcast, so if you guys enjoy the podcast every day, make sure you head on over there. Use promo code Grinders. That way you guys get incentives for Fantasy Draft for a year on Roto Grinders, and you get a 100% deposit bonus up to $600. That's going to wrap us up for this Wednesday. It was a great podcast, Dave. I appreciate you joining me, and we'll be back on Thursday with a special guest and a really cool announcement that we have coming here on the podcast on Thursday. So make sure you guys are tuning into that, and we'll see you then.